Hi everyone! Today starts the very last week of development of Shepherd for Hire. Although I had a lot done last week, I still have a huge amount of things to get done before the release of the game. I want a proper tutorial, a settings menu, music and sound effects, and a lot of small but important polish touches to the game. And without forgetting Android porting. That kind of stresses me out too, because I have to adapt all the controls to a touchscreen. So I'm trying to get my way out of this by posting a poll in the community tab of my channel. I'm hoping most of you plan to play this game on PC.
Nope.
That would give me a good reason not to work on Android porting. We'll see. Anyways, let's get this game done. First things first, I added a new round of sheep names for this devlog. So if you're discovering this channel through this video, just know that if you want, you can give a name to your sheep in this game. Just head to Devlog 3's comment section and answer to the pinned comment there with the name of your sheep. Just make sure to do it there, because there are sheep names scattered everywhere and I might forget to add some. Yes, one of you named his sheep E. I don't know what kind of community I'm creating here, but I like it. So in last devlog I added a whole new bunch of sheep types, but my display panel on the world map doesn't reflect all these new kind of sheep. I want the display to showcase how many and which type of each sheep there are in each level. Since I didn't add all the new type of sheep properly, following the clean code principles, I lost a huge amount of time manually setting which type of sheep and how many they are in each level. I'm just taking this as another lesson for my next project. I then spent the rest of the day working on a very important task, which is the tutorial. And I discovered building tutorials is really not a fun task. It's even more annoying when you don't have a proper cutscene system built. As I said in last devlog, my cutscene system is not versatile at all, so I kind of modified it to fit the tutorial, but basically my code is a mess. So in this tutorial, a farmer welcomes you in the region and teaches you the herding basics. I created a system where the tutorial could pause and play again when certain conditions were met. For example, here the condition is that the farmer's distance to the player is small enough. The problem is that the player can continue the tutorial here without having triggered the first event, so that would make a mess in my system, and to fix that I just created an invisible boundary in the pen, and now the player has to wait for the farmer. No choice. So the next thing to teach the player is that he can make the sheep flee. I had to fiddle with the timescale, but if I set the global timescale to 0, the game would pause and nothing would happen. So I focused on the sheep timescale and set the sheep timescale to 0, and this was working. Well, almost. I won't go over the whole tutorial here, but I basically wanted to teach the player that if a few sheep fall out of the herd, that's okay, they'll just run back to the herd, so the player shouldn't focus on these sheep, he would lose a lot of time. But if there are enough isolated sheep, they would create a small subherd, and this small subherd should be handled by the player. I figured my tutorial works sometimes, but not always, and I know I should have focused more on this tutorial. It's the first impression of the game after all, but I had so much left to do, so I thought I'd just come back to it if I have time. So building this tutorial still took me most of the day, and I had a little time left just to add a small functionality, which is the ability to reset the progression in the main menu. That's a very important feature actually, and it was Roman that pointed it out. While I made Roman work playtesting my game, I went back to playing Outpath. I'm half kidding, I actually spent a bit of time with Roman to see how she interacted with the game, but then I went back to Outpath. Since the last video, I really upscaled my base. It's slowly becoming a real industry to produce manufactured resources, but just an example to show you how this game is so unique. I needed bones in order to make my industry work. That's a common point I have with the dog in Shepherd for Hire, and bones can be looted on creatures, but the drop rate is kind of low. So I crafted a magic staff that could spawn creatures, and a bone scroll that, when used, turns all the nearby creatures into bones. Et voila, job done. I just thought it was fun to share that. And since we're all chilling on this very smooth Outpath soundtrack, why don't you subscribe to this channel if you're enjoying my devlogs? As you can see, it's still a small channel, so every one of you counts, and your support is very much appreciated. Thanks in advance, and enjoy the rest of this devlog. Day 24 was the day I added groove to my game. The first step for this is very simple, just adding music makes a real huge difference. So I scrolled through my game music library. I bought an asset with a whole bunch of different soundtracks a few months ago. In this asset there are musics for a lot of different game genres, so it was really fun scrolling through this pack and trying to imagine how the game would feel with Dark Souls-like music, for example. Yeah, finding the adequate soundtracks for each level is not that easy, because I want to have a different soundtrack that fits the ambience of each level. But after a lot of scrolling through my game music asset, and my stock video sound effects and music provider, I think I found some adequate samples for each level. Let me show you a few samples. Here's for the main menu, for the farm level, and for the swamp level. I was also looking for soundtracks to activate when some threats for the player entered the level, and I'm pretty happy of what I found. And globally, I'm pretty happy of all the music soundtracks I added to the game. As you can see, I worked on a transition in order to avoid a very abrupt transition between the two soundtracks, but in what you just heard, the transition was too slow, so I accelerated it. Next up were the sound effects, and that's another very fun part to work on. And very rewarding, because with just a few touches, the game starts really taking shape. For example, here with a sound effect that triggers when a sheep enters a score zone. In Devlog 2, Axel brought its lot of sheep sound effects, but I also wanted to add more variations to them. So that led to this kind of moment.
Audio jungle, audio jungle, audio jungle.
And I also found a sound effect for the warning trigger when the ram is about to ram the player. That actually wasn't easy to find at all.
Audio jungle,
I'm warning you.
audio jungle.
I'm warning you. I'm warning you.
I've then been looking for some UI sound effects to make it feel more snappy. And it does indeed feel more snappy now. Implementing sound effects can also bring its lot of bugs. Here, the wolf flea sound effect is called every frame, so that's why this happens. I'm not even sure I fixed this bug. You might encounter it in the game. I also added a sound effect to trigger when the dog is tired. Yeah, this does sound like an asthmatic dog, but it's the best I could find, so we'll do with that. And another very cute sound effect for when the player is sneaking. Implementing the sound effects was a good excuse to start working on the settings menu, starting with the sound effects and music volume levels. In order to make this system work, I had to refactor the sound effect system I had implemented at the very beginning of the development, where I only had some sheep and wolf sound effects, because at this time every object would have his sound manager system, and in order to have one single control for the player to balance the music and sound effects levels at his liking, I had to centralize everything on one single object, which is the settings manager. So that did ask quite a bit of work. And almost by the end of the day, I had my system working. I had just enough time left to work on the other settings panel, where there are two options for you. The first option allows you to toggle the sheep names. I don't know why you would remove them, they're so awesome. I guess for readability issues maybe. And the second option allows you to toggle on or off the blood particle systems. So maybe if your child wants to play this game, or maybe if you're very sensitive, you can toggle that option off. Roman's playtesting session 2 days ago left me with a huge list of bugs to fix. With only 4 working days left, I did feel slightly overwhelmed at this moment. And in this situation, the best thing to do is to take action and start fixing bugs one by one. Starting with this bug that would show a blank start menu when you first press start, and one bug fixed. Now the growl sound effect doesn't trigger on the world map. Another bug fixed. The dog barks when opening the level display on the world map. Another fix. So day 25 was basically all about bug fixing, and I got that bug list down to more than half of it. A very frustrating day, but a very necessary one too. Roman's playtest uncovered a really important bug that would trigger when the player would release a golden sheep from the wolf's mouth. In this case, the golden sheep would just stand there doing nothing. Fortunately, that bug was pretty easy to fix, but I really hope other bugs like this one aren't hiding behind a very specific trigger. One more bug fix. Next on the list, the wolf sometimes gets stuck due to his pathfinding behavior. I discovered this was due to the smoothing I applied to his path. There's a component on the wolf that allows me to make his path smoother. The problem is, sometimes the smoothing makes him hit some colliders, and this makes him stuck. So, you know what? I had no time to rework the global pathfinding system, so I just removed the smoothing behavior. 3 days left on your schedule makes you rethink your priorities. And almost all my bugs were fixed by now. So I could go back to working on the settings by implementing the settings menu on the main menu. So that's another thing I could remove from my checklist. Settings is done. There was one main element left on my checklist though, Android porting. I've been pushing back this moment for so long, but now was the time to tackle this task. As you can see on the simulator, nothing is ready to play this game on a phone. The UI is a complete mess and you can't even move the player. So first things first, I started by implementing player movement with a virtual joystick that would appear on the bottom left of the screen. Then to the moment I was fearing the most, reworking the UI. Remember in my past devlogs, it did not scale correctly with different resolutions. I did my in-game interfaces the same way. So yeah, that was a lot of work, but surprisingly not as much as I was expecting. So I still had time to work on the touchscreen controls for the player abilities, barking, growling, running, and sneaking. For the player to be able to trigger these on a phone, I added buttons on the UI elements that show the cooldowns for the different abilities. And since sneaking doesn't have any cooldown, I had to add a new button for this. The whole thing worked out pretty well, and in order to switch from the PC version to the phone version pretty easily, I had to refactor a few things to centralize all the systems in one toggle on the editor. And where's the run button, you may ask? I thought I was smart by making the player trigger the run ability just by touching anywhere on the screen. But I soon realized this would not work since, for example, just for moving, the player is already touching the screen. So the player is running, and that's annoying. So I removed this control and I added a button on the whole screen to trigger that. And in front of that button, I added some elements that would block the player from pressing the button in certain areas of the screen. For example, in front of the joystick. And this solved my problem. I'm skipping the details of every adaptation I had to work on to make this playable on a phone. Like for example, in order to open the level display in the world map, I added a button around the panel that the player can touch in order to open it. Another quick example is a button on the UI to open the pause menu. By the end of the day, the core of the Android porting challenge was done. I just had around 1 hour left, and I used that time to create a small panel that would show up the first time you launched the game. So if other people than you, guys and girls, download this game, they might show up on this channel. And if you arrived here through this panel, well, hello and welcome. And yes, I'm auto-advertising my own channel on my game, but the game is totally ad-free, so I think I can afford this. Oh, and I also slightly animated the main menu, so now that looks much more polished. with the sun setting down, we went back to building our base on sunken land with my friend Maxime. Honestly, isn't it beautiful? Barbed wires aside. Okay, credits on Max for the greenhouse. Something I really enjoy in this game is the amount of decoration you can loot and craft. This allows to create a very cozy environment in which you really want to go back. Of course, we got raided by bots multiple times. We ended up out of ammo.
Ah, j'ai plus une mune!
Ouais, gros, moi non plus.
Max died, and I had to fight medieval style. So we had to take our revenge on them. This was a very carefully prepared expedition. Our ammo was packed, our armor was upgraded. It was time to make it clear who was the master of this archipelago. And we failed miserably.
Oh! On m'a tué, on m'a tué!
A few moments later.
On day 27, I started by finalizing a few details for the Android porting. The very last element to add before working on making this game feel more juicy. I know you're all waiting for this part, I was waiting to work on this part too, is endgame credits. When the player finishes level 25, this appears on the screen. And as a fact, you indeed rock. Thanks again for all your support. One of you actually suggested this next feature in my last video, and this is a very smart addition. Now the indicator over the wolf also emphasizes his other states, like aggressive and attacking, where before it would only show when he's fleeing. This makes it much more clear for the player what the wolves are actually doing. And now comes the moment you were all waiting for, adding juice to the game. Starting with the wolf attacks on the sheep. This must feel impactful. This is how it looks like now. I already have a particle system and an attack animation, but that is clearly not enough. First addition, a slight slow motion effect when the wolf grabs the sheep. After that, I added a slight screen shake, then a red image that flashes on the screen for a very short amount of time, and finally a very slight zoom. Okay, now to the second part of the attack, when the wolf eats the sheep. I started by freezing the frame where the wolf eats the sheep for a very slight amount of time. This is almost imperceptible. To be more accurate, the frame freezes for 0.02 seconds. But it does make a difference. Another timescale modifier with a slow motion effect. In addition to that, a bloom effect that simulates the player being blinded by the violence of this attack. Because it's never enough, I also added chromatic aberration, very slightly because it can be weird. This affects the edges of the screen. As you can see, they become blurry. And the last touch, a very pronounced zoom effect. Now that looks impactful. You better keep your sheep safe. Just for fun, here's a small before-after showcase. Another small, almost imperceptible effect, but that does actually make a difference when playing, is a slight squash and squeeze effect on the sheep sprites when they get scared. This small addition makes herding a bit more lively too, and it really looks very cute. Another event that needs more impact is when a sheep enters the score zone. On every sheep entering the score zone, I want a small amount of dopamine being released in your gamer brain. So I worked on a particle system that would trigger on that event, and by also adding a slight zoom, I think I nailed it. All of this took a fair amount of time, and on day 27 I had enough time to work on a last addition, which is in my opinion very important. Right now, when the player finishes a level, nothing actually shows how many bones he gained. The number of bones at the top left of the screen just updates when the world map is loaded, and that's all. So I worked on this effect, and honestly it wasn't easy to build since I didn't use any asset for that. Just look at the kind of bugs I encountered while implementing it. But that's a new tool unlocked for me in my future projects. It was time again to take our revenge on the bots. And this time it really went better. The moment when we first launched the game and we arrived naked on an island now feels like ages ago. I just had a few polished tasks left, and I wanted to spend a significant amount of the day playtesting. I started by adding sound effects to the level complete UI. Don't mind the element's position, it was just a way of testing for me. That's not quite it. Let's try with other sound effects. Okay, the time score is better, but the sheep... ugh. Please, just make it stop. Oh, that might be good actually. Again, but faster? Perfect, keep it that way. Always remember dopamine and gamer brain. Since I was working on the level complete sound effects, I added a small music that would trigger when the level is successful. Okay, wrong sound effect, that's the level failed sound effect. Yeah, here we go. And for the level failed, even if you've already heard it, in just a few minutes, I added a small color change to the display panel when the player is in range to open it. Ideally, the difference would be much more pronounced, but I don't have time to do more than that. Initially, I wanted to add key rebinding options to the game, so I started working on that, but I soon realized this would mean spending the rest of the day on key rebinding. I have much more to do, and the game might have a few unexpected surprises that pop up, so long for key rebinding. Sorry for all the French viewers that have a ZQ SD keyboard, and I don't know in other countries if there are differences in the keyboards too. Just use a controller. I then finished working on the bone reward system, because it has to trigger after every cinematic that may pop up in the world map. And with a few sound effects, this is how it looks like. And how about new sound effects when you unlock a new level or a new map? And a typewriter sound effect for when the NPC is talking. Okay, I've been triggering one sound effect for every letter shown, so maybe trigger it once every 3 letters shown, for example. Yeah, that sounds much more human. Another very small addition, but adding a background to the player bones on the world map makes it pop out much more. I'm finally starting to get the feel of this game. Because I didn't code my enemies properly, I had to adapt the wolf effects to the tentacle. This really didn't take much time, but ideally, following the clean code principles, I wouldn't even have had to work on this. And finally came the moment of playtesting. In this challenge, I clearly didn't allocate enough time to playtesting, but I guess that's how you learn. So during this playtesting session, I found another lot of bugs that I was able to fix pretty fast, and thankfully, or maybe not, I didn't encounter any critical bug that would completely block the player's progression, and I really hope I got them all out of the way by now. I know for a fact there are a few bugs left I couldn't fix, but they're not critical, or you might just have to restart a level, or on the other hand, it could help you win a level. So yeah, sorry for the bugs left. And with this first project coming to an end, I wanted to wish you to have fun playing the game if you're going to play it, and I'll be telling you everything you need to know on the release date in the outro right here. I also need your help for the Android version, so stick around if you're interested. I finished! Wow. That was intense. I'm not realizing yet I just finished my first game. I think I'll realize that when it's online and you guys give some feedback. I know there are bugs in there, but of course I didn't assign enough time to playtest, so it's just a fact. I just hope I fixed all the game-breaking bugs. And I'm sorry if you expected this game to be more than what it is, but just as a reminder, this was my very first project. I have a goal and a dream to become a game developer, so I need to iterate on more games, create more projects from start to finish. So yeah, except if there's a game-breaking bug or game-breaking crashes that I can identify and fix pretty fast, the game is how it is. and I hope you'll enjoy it, really. I know in the future, when I'll publish a real game, I will dedicate much more time after the game's release to improve it, fix the bugs the players will encounter, and add more content. I also wanted to thank you for the support you brought during all this challenge. It actually really made a difference. It kept me super motivated the whole time. I don't know if I'd still be so enthusiastic about this whole adventure if I didn't have you. So yeah, thanks so much for all your support. The release date for Shepherd on Hire is planned for next Wednesday. What a nice calendar, right? The 20th. December the 20th. 20th of December. Wednesday, December 20th. Anyways, you got the idea. I think that's tomorrow for you, or maybe after tomorrow. Whatever happens, on Wednesday it's on itch.io, and I'll keep you updated if anything delays the release on the App Store. Yeah, so the App Store. They recently updated their policy on publishing apps and games, and now each new app needs to go through a closed testing phase that runs for at least 14 days and with at least 20 testers. That's before being able to release the production build. So I need at least 20 of you to test the game on Android. I'll be putting a link in the description to a form where you just have to fill in your email address, your country or region, and I'll be sending you a link to the closed alpha test. Anyone can join, so feel free. And I'll also put a second form in the description for your feedback. PC players, feel free to fill it too. I especially need feedback on the score thresholds, but any feedback is actually welcome. I need vacations or holidays. I don't know what's the better term. I think the difference in usage is between the UK and the US. Anyways, the past 2 months have been very intense, so I won't be posting any videos for the next few weeks, but I'll see you in January with a few devlogs on the game jam I participated in 1 month ago, and I have a lot of projects in mind, and I'm pretty sure you'll really enjoy the next one. I'm so excited to share it with you. I just want to say it now, but I want to keep the surprise, so I'll see you in January. And hey, vacations are not an excuse to forget to press play.